Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're taking a deep dive into one of the absolute most fascinating and, frankly, terrifying phenomena of the human mind. We're talking about sleep paralysis. We're going to explore this waking nightmare, and we'll do it not just by throwing clinical definitions at you, but by really unpacking 5 deeply unsettling, true, real-world accounts. It's like mapping out this terrifying space where the boundary between your dreams and reality just completely breaks down. So if you've ever wondered what happens when your mind wakes up but your body is completely trapped, well, you're in the exact right place.
Just imagine opening your eyes in the dead of night. You're in your own bed, your own room. But as you try to sit up, you realize you literally can't move. And then, creeping out of the darkness, you hear an indescribable, robotic yet alive type sound. Now, that's not from some Hollywood horror movie. That is a direct quote from someone's actual waking experience. It immediately pulls us right into that helpless terror of sleep paralysis. It's a total assault on your senses. You're completely aware, entirely paralyzed, and basically forced to endure whatever your brain decides to project right into your physical space.
Okay, before we get into the stories, let's quickly ground this clinically. Sleep paralysis is, by definition, the feeling of being completely unable to move right upon awakening. The kicker? Your senses and your awareness are entirely intact. You aren't dreaming in the traditional sense. Instead, you're trapped in this weird half-asleep, half-awake state. Basically, you're caught in the transition between REM sleep and wakefulness. Your brain is turned on the waking consciousness, but, and here's the glitch, it hasn't yet flipped the switch to let your muscles move. You're essentially a captive audience inside your own body.
To really grasp the dread here, we kind of have to look at the anatomy of a typical episode, which usually follows a pretty brutal escalation. Step 1, you wake up in pitch blackness, usually with this hazy, confused awareness. Step 2, realizing total immobility. You send the signal to your arm to move or your mouth to scream, and absolutely nothing happens. And then comes the true horror. Step 3, the arrival of the entity. Because your panicked brain is trapped between these dream states, it often hallucinates a presence. It feels like an inescapable trap. And, as our first story shows us, this trap can be deeply tied to our real-world emotions.
Which brings us to Section 1, Manifestations of Grief, looking at trauma as a catalyst. See, the brain doesn't always just conjure up some random monster. Sometimes these hallucinations are deeply emotional and specifically tailored to the person's immediate state of mind. So let's look at the conditions that created an absolute perfect storm for our first victim. We're talking intense stress. We have a college student enduring finals week, pulling a grueling all-nighter to study for a biology final. They are severely sleep-deprived. Eventually they pass out, only to wake up completely immobilized with that hazy awareness we just talked about. They can only move their eyes. And when they look toward the center of their room, they see a vision. It's a woman, standing dead center, facing the bed, wearing a black dress and holding some kind of long object. The emotional weight of this is just staggering. The student said, "I tried to say mom desperately, but I was stuck in my own body." The woman in the black dress approached the bed, knelt right down and touched the student's forehead. And when the entity got eye to eye with them, the student saw their own mother's face. Now, the heartbreaking tragedy here is that the student's mother had passed away just 3 weeks prior to this. Once the paralysis finally broke, the student bolted out of the room screaming for their mom, only to be hugged by their dad. This whole account just vividly illustrates how profound grief and extreme exhaustion can violently collide during an episode.
All right, let's shift gears completely for Section 2, Horrors in the Closet. This is about visceral terror.
We're moving from deeply personal grief right into sheer visceral terror. We're going to explore intense auditory and physical hallucinations that feel incredibly real. Now, we all know the dream world, right? It's vague, it's bizarre, it operates on this fuzzy logic where things just kind of magically happen. But sleep paralysis pulls all of that into the real world. You are paralyzed in your own bed. The unearthly horrors of your nightmares literally transcend and invade your waking physical space. You aren't running through some fuzzy dream forest. You are staring at your actual bedroom wall while an impossible monster enters your actual room. Let's see how this tension builds in our second story. So this victim wakes up from a fuzzy REM nightmare into total immobility. Then, out of nowhere, comes this auditory assault, a repeating, robotic, yet alive sound. It was happening every 3 seconds, growing louder and louder. Completely unable to scream, the victim's eyes locked onto their closet door, a door they deliberately never leave open. And through a tiny crack in that door, they saw a distorted man's face with this unhumanly large, open-mouth smile. With every robotic sound, the closet and the face seemed to physically push closer to the bed, until suddenly, bam, the closet doors slammed shut, and everything just went completely silent. Even at 24 years old, the victim immediately ran to their parents' room, just entirely shaken by how real that sensory assault was.
Our third story shares a really similar, horrifying auditory element coming from the exact same place, the bedroom closet. The victim described how they could actually feel this sickening laughter wash over me in waves, pouring out of the closet. Just think about that for a second. You know for a fact you're awake. You know you are paralyzed. You can't even turn your head to look away. And from the dark corners of your room, you don't just hear it, but you actively feel this sinister, evil laughter washing right over you. The victim actually pointed out that they had never even heard of sleep paralysis at the time, so they truly thought they were just losing their mind.
This really highlights just how severe physical hallucinations can get. While they were enduring that sickening laughter, the entity in the closet threw a human head, and it landed directly on the victim's chest, face up. And it wasn't just any head. It was the face of a girl the victim actually knew in high school. The absolute panic here is just unimaginable. The victim completely lost it. Unable to scream, they were only able to make these grunting and moaning noises, violently wriggling and straining to rock side to side, just trying to get this hallucinatory severed head off their chest. The sensation of weight, of touch, it felt terrifyingly real. Moving on to section 3, visions of the future. We're looking at surreal premonitions. So what happens when that typical demon or monster is swapped out for impossible premonition? In this story, between 5 and 6 a.m., a victim wakes up totally paralyzed and helpless. They hear heavy footsteps, and their entire family, brother, sister, dad, mom, walks right into the room. But something is really unnerving. They're hysterically sobbing, and they appear to be at least a foot taller than normal, literally towering over the bed, heads nearly hitting the ceiling. After a bit, they leave, the paralysis ends, and the victim gets up to find their actual family fast asleep in their beds. Surreal, right? Well, just listen to how this sequence unfolds. A few days later, this very same person is struck by a speeding car, suffering a fractured thigh bone and 3 other broken bones. A week after the accident, while they're hospitalized, the victim's family stands next to their hospital bed looking down at them, the mom crying. And because of the hospital bed's low angle, the family towering over them perfectly recreated the exact, precise image from that sleep paralysis episode. The victim admitted they aren't superstitious at all, but they did note that if they were, they would 100% believe that dream was some kind of sign or some kind of prediction of the future. And honestly, that leaves us with a truly chilling thought. Was this intense paralysis episode just a bizarre, random coincidence cooked up by a waking mind? Or was it some unexplainable warning of a massive, traumatic event waiting just a few days down the road? That leads us right into our final theme, Section 4, Reality Bleeds Through. Let's talk about weaponized memories. How do strange, completely real-world waking memories act like a seed, planting themselves in the brain only to sprout into literal horrors during sleep paralysis? Well, in the summer of 2016, our final victim was out late drinking with friends. They were walking by a house and spotted someone actually hiding in a bush. As they got a little closer, this bizarre, super off-putting sound started coming from the bush. The friends all screamed, laughed it off, and ran away, just assuming someone was messing with them. But that very same night, the victim experiences sleep paralysis, and their paralyzed brain takes that exact real-world audio cue, that weird noise from the bush, and literally wraps a grotesque floating demonic head right around it. So after easily falling asleep, the victim wakes up completely immobile in near pitch blackness. Out of nowhere, that familiar, bizarre noise from the real-world bush earlier that night just starts playing in their room. They look down at the foot of the bed and see absolute pure nightmare fuel. A grotesque, demonic, ghost-like head. As this thing floats closer, they realize it actually has a body, but the body perfectly blends into the pitch blackness of the bedroom. The entity's mouth just hangs open, continuing to make that exact same sound from the bush, and it approaches until it is mere inches from the victim's face before suddenly fading away. The brain took a harmless waking memory and completely weaponized it. So I want to leave you with one final question today. Are these really just the elaborate tricks of a stressed out, sleep-deprived mind caught in some biological glitch between sleep and wakefulness? Or, as that towering premonition and the hyper-realistic physical touches seem to suggest, could they be terrifying signs of something just a bit beyond our current understanding? The boundary between our dreams and reality is incredibly fragile, and as these 5 stories have shown us today, when that boundary finally breaks, the results are literally nothing short of a waking nightmare. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer today. Keep exploring, stay curious, and maybe, just maybe, leave a nightlight on tonight.